All right, so this is my 2004 WRX, and it is currently mid-February in 2023. It's a nice day out, so I decided to come out here and give a little update video on my car. I've actually had this car since 2012, so I've had it a little over 10 years now, going on 11. I got it in about, I think, July 2012. I bought it used. I got it for $8,500 back then, and I think it had about 94 or 96,000 miles. I'm not 100% sure. And now it actually has 160,000 miles, 162,000 miles to be exact. I've done, I'd say, quite a few upgrades to this car. It's not like heavily modified by any means, but I've done some, smaller and lighter things to it. Number one, you're going to see the wheels that we have on here. These are the STI BBSs from a 2004 STI. So they are the same bolt pattern, the 5x100, which these are actually kind of rare wheels. They only came on the 2004 STI, and they are 17 by 7.5. I just recently put these Continental all-season tires on it because I kind of just use this car as an all-around daily driver at this point, and I don't really take it out in the snow all that much, but it does need to get me around in the snow because my other car is a 2017 BRZ that I use for autocross and in the summertime. So that is certainly not my winter car, and that car is also from California, so I'm trying to keep it in really good shape. Not sure if you're going to be able to see it well up in there or at all, but I have the STI Pink Springs, the USDM version. I think I got those a couple years ago online. They were used, and they are paired with KYB Excel-G struts, which are just a general replacement. The one thing I did not change out is the top hats. These are actually the original top hats that are pretty worn at this point. They're actually starting to crack a little bit. So at this point, I'm just going to run them. The car is getting a little bit older. This has the full Cobb Stage 2 package. So it's got the Cobb downpipe, which you can't really see, but it's hidden back there behind the SPT heat shield. It has the Cobb intake. It has a Torque Solutions intake tube going into a Perrin turbo inlet, which typically tear on these cars. The stock ones do, so that's why you replace them. It's more of a reliability mod. The EGR system has been basically completely deactivated on this car, so it's just venting the atmosphere right now. Don't tell the EPA. I've had to reprogram the ECU to not throw those codes. It also has a replacement Koyo radiator up front here. It is just a standard replacement because these tend to have issues around 125,000 miles. They will actually split right over here at where the I guess anywhere along the top here, right where the plastic connects to the metal is where it's going to split. So you'll want to change that out probably around 125,000 miles. I also put some Samco hoses on here because the hoses were getting a little bit worn. We got the top one and the bottom one down there, which you can't see. Put OEM fluid back in for the coolant. And also Subaru makes, if you want to make your head gaskets last, obviously don't beat the shit out of your car, but also put in the little blue bottle from Subaru. It's kind of like a stop leak product, but it's from Subaru. So I would highly recommend that. And it was actually recommended back in the day, back in the early to mid 2000s, to stop some of those head gasket leaks. This car does have the original EJ205 in it still. It has the original transmission, everything. I just changed the fluids a lot in it, and I try not to beat on the car a whole ton. This was actually my autocross car for a number of years, from about 2012 to 2019, so it has seen its fair share of, high RPMs and launches and things like that. It's hanging in there, but it's showing some age. I think the worst thing about this car at this point is the rust. It's not too bad on this side. You can kind of see over here and in the back here, it's just kind of cropping up. I've put some fluid film on this, and this entire car has been fluid filmed, but I put some back here and even on top of it, but you can kind of see it's just starting to creep up here. Over here, this side has been like this for a couple years. I have fluid film all over this to kind of trap it all in and not make it grow as much, but it still is, it's creeping up and it's coming along. And I've even, redone in here a little bit. I've just kind of scraped off some of the rust. I've fluid filmed it. I put paint over it. So overall, the body's not too incredibly rusty there. However, up here with the fender, that is getting kind of crusty right there, and that is all rusted out, the fender there, which fortunately is replaceable, but I have fluid film currently all over that because I don't want that to rust anymore. And I can't really show you, but the rocker panels on this car are probably the worst portion of the car, unfortunately. On each of these corners, especially on this side, because you typically, here in the US, we drive on this side of the road, you're gonna get like a lot of rust and salt and everything caked up in there, and this is actually my daily driver for almost 10 years. So the rocker panels are pretty bad. They've been patched, they've been cut out. I've put metal in there, and then I've put Bondo over top of that, and then I've coated that, and I've done the best that I can to keep it there without totally redoing the rocker panels, which I might need to have done here if I'm going to keep the car. But that's been done on 3 of the corners at this point. The back ones are probably the worst. And over here on the driver's side, I haven't done this one yet, but I'm probably gonna have to do that one if I do plan on keeping the car. Which at this point, let's be honest, you've had a car for 10 years, you're probably just gonna keep it, right? So I plan on keeping this car pretty much until something happens to it, right? I'm kind of attached to it, and I'm just gonna keep it. I'll go over a couple of the random cosmetic mods, and some of you are probably gonna get mad at me for this, but I do have an STI badge on here in the front. I just have always thought these are cool. I have the I badge, which came on these cars in Japan. It has yellow fog lights, just the stock fog lights, but tint over top of that. To go along with the STI badge, like I said, it has the STI wheels and the STI springs on it, along with those KYB struts. It has a Whiteline 24 millimeter front sway bar, and I believe it might also be a 24 in the rear too. It's an adjustable 24 on both of them. The front is set to the lightest setting and the rear set to the stiffest. Front strut bar, this is the STI strut bar that came on the C-Spec and some other versions of this car. Actually says Fuji Heavy Industries Aerospace Division. So these are getting more and more rare to find. They are an OEM part. Pretty much everything on this car, or at least a lot of the things on this car, are an OEM kind of plus option. The springs, the strut bar, the wheels, things like that. I really like that OEM plus feel for a car. It still has pretty much stock everything else. It's got like a stock top mount. The battery hasn't been relocated or anything like that. That is just a standard Napa battery. It's a stage 2 car really, with the intake, exhaust. Oh, and I'll even comment on the exhaust since I didn't mention it. It has the Cobb catback, which is probably one of the best sounding exhausts for this car. So it has a full Cobb turbo back. And there's really not much to say about the inside here. Basically everything is stock here. It's got the stock Samco gauge that I got used and I ended up adding on. And everything else in here is pretty much stock. It's got the stock 6-disc CD changer. It used to have some fog lights, extra fog lights and driving lights in the front. That's what this was for, but I don't use that anymore. It's not actually hooked up to anything. As far as fluids in this car, I almost exclusively use Motul fluids. So for the oil, I've kept to having 5W40 in this car, the Motul XS. They typically come with 5W30, but in my opinion, you should always be running a 40 weight in an EJ like this, a turbo EJ. They tend to be kind of harsh on oil because the oil is actually lubricating the turbo. So it gets heated up and it also sits in there, as you shut the car down. So you'll tend to shear your oil a little bit, and it'll actually wear your oil down from about a 40 weight to a 30 weight when it's at the end of the interval. People that were running 30 weight oil originally in this car and beating on it when it came out, that's why they were having oiling issues and they were getting spun rod bearings and things like that. And that's even why people today are getting spun rod bearings, because they're not checking their oil and they're not using a higher weighted oil. And also in the rear diff, which I won't show you, but it's back there under the car, obviously, I also run Motul oil in that also. Not a huge biggie, but I also have the old school mud flaps on this car from Rally Armor. I got them all the way around, and they've helped keep a little bit of crap off of the car over the years. They're literally over 10 years old at this point, and you can't even buy this version anymore. These were like the original hard, kind of flimsy plastic. These are not the urethane ones. I actually have the urethane ones on my BRZ, and I prefer those a little bit more. I've had numerous things replaced on this car. I've had the front calipers need to be replaced probably twice already. They tend to get very junked up. These 2-pot calipers on these cars get junked up with stuff in them in the caliper seals, and you either have to reseal them or get new calipers. So it's had new calipers on the front twice. The rears are actually still stock. 2 different sets of replacement centric rotors on them, just blank ones. And I've gone through a number of, over the past decade, Stop Tech pads on this car. I run the 309s. So it's got more braking bite. It's got a little bit more brake power, but it's nothing that, again, is gonna blow your socks off. It doesn't have the STI Brembos or anything like that. It's just an overall better street car. Anytime something typically ran out and I had to replace anything, I replaced it with something, you know, aftermarket, a little bit better. And this is kind of what it's become over the last 10 years. A couple small issues with the car besides the rust. I'd say that's probably the worst issue. The AC does not work anymore. I think the compressor just kind of died on it, and I never kind of replaced it or thought to replace it. This expansion tank up here, this is the coolant, not expansion tank, reservoir, I don't know what you want to call it. You can actually see it's leaking a little bit more there, but I've had this kind of patched up for a number of years now, and I just kind of keep patching it anytime it gets a little pinhole leak in it. It also has the valve cover leaks, especially over on this side, which kind of sucks. It leaks down onto the uppipe, unfortunately, and then that kind of burns off when I let it set. When I let it sit in the driveway for about a week, it kind of drips on the exhaust there, and then you start it up and you drive it around and everything gets hot and it burns off. You can kind of see little puffs of smoke come out of the hood scoop. And it's a little bit annoying, it smells a little bit, but you know, after 20 minutes of driving, it kind of goes away. And ultimately, I probably should fix that. It probably needs, the timing belt has been done already once with all the idlers, the water pump, the belt, the whole, everything in front. But that's probably gonna have to be done again because that was done probably about, I believe like 10 years ago now. So I'm probably gonna have to have that done again, and while they're in there, they might as well do the valve covers. Another kind of oddball thing you'll see up here is just some general reflective material that I got from Home Depot. I think all cars kind of come with an insulating material up here, so the engine heat doesn't hurt your paint up there. And over, the last 20 years I've had, well, 20 years this car's existed, the 10 years that I've had it, it deteriorated and it started falling into the engine bay and getting everywhere, and it was kind of this fibrous material that was just getting everywhere. So I finally got rid of it. It was half falling off anyhow. So I got rid of it, I replaced it with that. I know a lot of people just rip them off, but I preferred to put something else back up there. I'd say if you want to keep your WRX running for this long, always check your oil. Don't drive like an asshole, like I know a lot of people do with these highway pulls and they're really beating on it. I'll be honest, at this point, after racing it for so many years, I rarely go over about 4,000 RPM, and I just kind of putt around here. And it's kind of a daily driver, and that's how it's gotten up to 160,000 miles. But I'll be real, I stopped racing it, I think, at about 150,000 miles. So it did its job. A cool little street car. It's a cool little daily driver at this point. It's not going to blow your socks off. It's still running the Cobb off-the-shelf tune with the access port. It just has a downpipe and a full exhaust and an intake. Everything internally with the engine is still stock, and I plan to keep it like this. It's just a cool little daily driver that kind of gets me around to where I need to go, and I usually take my BRZ out whenever I'm going to the track, going to do autocross and things like that. This is not the car for it. This car is getting a bit old, a bit rusty, and it's seen better days. But I'm still going to keep it. I'm still going to keep it running, and I hope to have it for a couple more years still at least. I'll keep you guys updated if anything changes with the car and if I add anything or anything like that. Peace out. See ya.